So, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I am growing a little bit of a beard here, and that is true because I want to hide some of what I got going on here under my chin. As a friend that we had recently said,
"Look at yourself. You should go on a diet. You are obese."
yeah, that one still rubs me the wrong way. It's more about the idea of saying stuff appropriate in a language. And today we are going to talk about language appropriateness and saying the appropriate things and the reasons why we might say things that come across as inappropriate. And the reason why I'm focusing on appropriateness, because, it's an important subject, but just absolutely shocked that there are very few videos even, touching on the subject of appropriateness. And the reason I'm amazed and shocked is that if you actually are an ESL teacher and you received your certification or your training through like a reputable organization like I did with University of Cambridge and CELTA, you learn about language appropriateness as part of your training. And the fact that there are hardly any videos about language appropriateness online from these English teachers makes me wonder if they are like actual certified English teachers at all, because the fact that they haven't talked about this at all kind of just absolutely blows my mind. And if you say something in English and people might look at you a different way or think that maybe you're saying something inappropriate, we're going to talk about 3 ways that you might be able to identify if you are saying something inappropriate or not. These are the 3 pitfalls that a lot of people fall into. And even though these are pitfalls, there's things that can be easily changed. You are able to adapt to them. So let's go ahead and go into those. So the first pitfall that people might fall into is that you just don't have a big enough vocabulary. Sometimes you might just say a word that doesn't seem appropriate or right just because you don't have a big enough vocabulary to actually know the specific word that is used in that context. And that is very common. And this is hopefully something that can change over time as you build your vocabulary. And this happens to many students. Many students will say some word that might be slang or even inappropriate because they can't think of the actual specific word that should be used in those situations. Now, I usually find this amongst learners who are maybe A2 level, maybe B1 level, and a listener like myself, we might hear that and it sounds offensive, but we might actually laugh it off because we know that the student has a limited vocabulary and therefore we know what they're trying to say, that they're not trying to sound rude. It's just the limited vocabulary they have. So building your vocabulary is very important, not just so that you can communicate, but also so that you can appropriately speak the language and speak it clearly and speak it in a way that doesn't offend people. The second thing I want to talk about are historical references, and these historical references can kind of fall into that little category of number 1 as well, because the way you use your vocabulary in one country or in one language might not necessarily be the same as it is in English. Let me give you an example. So in many cultures, countries, languages, saying the word master connected to somebody's name is just normal. It means that they are an expert in something. However, in the United States, if you say the name master and then somebody's name, this harkens back to the days of slavery in the United States where the plantation owner was known as the master. And by using the word master in this case, it doesn't necessarily always come across as somebody being an expert in something. Even though that's what you might intend, it will sound bad. And even though the intentions aren't bad, it will sound bad. And this comes from that historical reference. So when you say this to some people in the United States, it can come across as very offensive. And depending on who it is, it could be extremely offensive. Therefore, you want to make sure that you are saying things that are correct and maybe know a little bit about American history and understand, due to the history, why somebody might think that a word like master would be considered inappropriate and in many cases very offensive. So the third one I want to talk about is cultural appropriateness. So when you are in another country, you want to make sure that you know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable to ask or what to say. And this is another pitfall that people fall into. And in the United States, saying something like our friend at POC English said,
"Look at yourself. You should go on a diet. You are obese."
about, being very obese would be considered culturally unacceptable. These are just things that we do not say in the United States. And I'll give you a few other examples as well. So asking somebody's age, you could probably get away with it, but some people might find it offensive. I don't, but some people might. Again, when you talk about somebody's weight or comment on their weight, that would usually be offensive, especially if somebody is overweight or obese, like he says in that video. That would even be considered more offensive because it's usually seen in a negative way. Asking somebody's religion, even though you just might be curious, can be seen as offensive. There was a situation that I had when I was living in Russia. Somebody asked me if I was married or not. Now, asking if somebody's married or not is not necessarily offensive, but they then ask, "Why aren't you married?" And my answer in my head was, "That's none of your damn business." But I just said, "Because." But in the United States, this might be considered by some as an offensive question. And the reason why this is that there's a very, I would say, bold line between the private lives and the public lives of Americans. Now, we as Americans might be very outspoken and say a lot of things, or not afraid to express our opinion or just talk to people randomly on the street. It feels totally normal for us. However, when it comes to our private life, we kind of keep that private, whereas in other cultures, it seems like that line might be blurred. Now, let me give you a situation in Russia that I had that for people from Russia, this might sound totally normal, but for an American, it's not. So I was a teacher at a school, but there was another student and her husband that their level was like significantly higher than the students I had in the class, and they wanted me to teach them separately, away from the class. And I said, sure, I'll go ahead and do that. They both said that they would pay for 2 students to do that. I was like, okay, great. We can go to the local cafe or something like that, and we can do the lessons. And they said, well, you can come over to our house. We'll invite you over, have food and stuff like that. And in the United States, if you hardly even know somebody, they invite you over to their house, it can seem fishy. It can seem really fishy. And so while they might have thought that it was inviting, all of a sudden, like, alarm bells started going off in my head. I'm like, why are they asking me to come and visit their house? Like, and I hardly even know them, right? Now, I know a lot of Russians out there might be laughing at this, but this is how it is in the United States. We usually get to know somebody first before we accept them into our private lives. And in America, we really are, really big on this privacy thing. We really want to make sure that our private life is private, that privacy is a priority for us. So asking somebody to come over after only knowing them for, meeting them once or twice seemed really, really odd for me. And it would for a lot of Americans as well. Not all Americans, mind you that, not all Americans, but many Americans, this approach would come across as very, not intrusive, but maybe just a little bit awkward. And that might just give you an idea of the difference between the cultures and how something in the United States might not necessarily really look as it does in another country. So that's all I wanted to say today. Learn the vocabulary, learn the history, learn the culture so you can fit in a little bit more wherever it is that you want to fit into. If you want to fit into the United States, learn these cultural things. If it's Britain or Australia, learn the cultural things, learn the history, learn how the vocabulary is used, and find out what is offensive or not. There are tons of resources on the internet where you can find what British people or Canadians or New Zealanders deem offensive or not. So do that, look up the resources, prepare yourself, because you might think that you're saying something that's fine, but in somebody else's culture, it might not be. And I just want to make this video to kind of prepare you for that, so you don't have one of these, "You are very obese."
Look at yourself. You should go on a diet. You are obese.
type of situations. Because honestly, if that guy came across as an asshole, I'm sorry. If somebody said that to me again, I'd thump him on the skull a little bit. Let's just put it that way. But thank you all very much. Hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. It is the 4th of July and it's starting to get dark, so I need to go see the fireworks. And you might have heard them as I was recording, but have a wonderful day and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.